after you, Danny, and a bull is out running around, what are you going to do? Common sense. Huh? You're going to run. You're going to get out of the way. You're not going to stop the bull. What that tells me is, Elizabeth, a slave is, if you get hooked by a bull, odds are you probably wasn't paying attention. You probably had your phone. I could see his slave standing out there on his phone, paying attention to the world and all this stuff going on. And all of a sudden, here comes this bull, comes up there and he gores him. The thing is that the 30 shekels of silver was the minimum amount that you could pay. Because this slave was a worthless slave. And you had to pay. So in other words, Artie would have to give you 30 shekels of silver to pay for the value, the loss, and for you to bury him. So you had to bury him for 30 pieces. That's what it take you. That's how much you've lost. That's the minimum that he had to pay. So somebody go to Zacharias or Zechariah. 11, 12, 13.
I told them, if you think it best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they valued me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter at the house of the Lord.
So, he went to them, he delivered a message, and he says, I'll tell you what, just pay me what you think I'm worth. Just pay me what you think I'm worth. 30 pieces of silver was an insult. It was an insult. You're not worth the price of a slave. You're just worth nothing. And so, he made them pay him the worthless slave. And what God say? Take it and throw it to the pot. So the thing is that we're understanding something, that 30 means something. 30 is a meaningless number according to their interpretation. But we have to ask, where did this come from? Where did this 30 pieces come from? This 30 pieces is actually something to come from the Sumerians. The Sumerians were a people who lived somewhere around 4000, 2000 BC. They had a saying. Their saying was, it is considered a mere 30 shekels worth. What that meant is that you have to understand their system of measurement, their system of interpretation. Everything that they did was based upon the measurement of 60. To them, 60 was a complete number. If they offered 30, what did that mean? It meant, Danny, that is incomplete. In other words, it's insufficient. It will not do it. It kind of sheds a whole new light, because when the Messiah was on the cross, what did he cry out? What word did he use? But he used something else. And he says, it is what? He says, it is what? It is finished. It is finished is also, in other words, it means, it says, it is complete. Now, if you go into the real meaning of 30, because the Jews and how they measured him, they were saying, they used an old tradition. He says, what will you give me for him? He says, they said, he means so little to them. He don't mean nothing to us. He means nothing to us. What did Judas say by taking that amount? He means so little to me. When we start talking about this thing, we got to understand something. How old was Jesus when he entered into the ministry?
30.
How old?
30.
30. 30 is symbolic of the letter Lamed. 30. When you're 30 years old, Lamed means that you have the strength to carry the Word of God into the wilderness. See, that was the role of the Jews. The role of the Jews was to take God's glory into the world. When the Messiah told and gave the Great Commission, he says, go you into where? All of the world. Take God's word into all of the world. When you reached 30 years old, that meant that you had the strength to go. That also meant that you had reached that point of your learning, because another word for the Lamed meant to learn and to teach. So prior to 30, you learned. At 30, you had what you need to accomplish the job. When he cried out, it is complete, basically what he was saying is, he says, it is enough. This will do it. Because if you think about 30 degrees, our calendar, our clock, our calendar is based upon 30 degrees units. The Sumerians believed in a 60 thing. All right, so if you look, our calendar, our clock is based upon 30 degrees. Now, when we talk about 30, the Lamed also represents the strong tower. Did you know that actually lays out a spiritual principle of what happens? So in the old days, when a people or a group of people wanted to conquer a territory, what did they do? What they did was they sent out scouts, forerunners. The first thing they sent out was pathfinders. The pathfinders, they went out, they were scouts, but as well, they wasn't just looking, they was looking for a way for people to get there. We look for easy paths to get to. Then, once they found this thing, they started sending out troops. The United States government used this very thing when they conquered the Americas. How did they do it? What they used was this godly principle. So what you would do, they would go in, and they would actually go into an area, and they'd conquer an area. As they conquered that area, Danny, what they would do, they would build a fort. Or they would build a strong tower. One of the advantages of having a strong tower in a desert land or in a land, because that allowed them, AJ, a vantage point that they could see the approaching enemy. And so what they would do, they would go and they'd build this place. And then from that strong defensible portion, what they would do, they would actually start building walls. And then start building settlements. And then from there, they would build a road to that so they could get more. And then once the fortified area was strong enough, Lance, then they would send out into another area. And so what they did is they would go, you see what I'm talking about. That's why in the United States, in so many cities, in so many states, we have forts. The old ancient forts. That's how these things evolved. Because the forts was used to establish a stronghold. The Jews was basically the same thing, and it's represented by this right here. They would go and they would conquer spiritual territories. And they would say, because again, one of the areas they talk about in the Bible is tearing down what? Strongholds. Tearing down strongholds. These strongholds, because the same thing, if this is a principle that is used for good, did you know that it is a very same principle that is used for evil, for wrong? In other words, the question was this morning was, Was Judas possessed or not? That was the question. I said, I don't believe that he was. Because to be possessed means loss of control. Take as an example the man in the tomb who was possessed. What did he do? He ran around and cut himself. He had the faculties to know that he was in this torment, but yet he had lost control, right? How did this lose control? How did he lose control? How did he become possessed? How a person becomes possessed is this. The enemy comes in. He creates a stronghold. He creates an area. How does a person become an addict? They have this thing in their mind that the enemy uses to attach. In other words, he comes in and he attaches that. Hey, AJ, remember when Monty did this to you? Or, hey, remember this stuff don't go? And all of a sudden he attacks that little area because that is a stronghold that is attached in your mind. Anxiety is a stronghold that the enemy's come in and whispered. He says, hey, you've lost control. You're losing control. It is a stronghold that is coming inside you. The next thing is that they come in, they make an attachment. When the Bible talked about this guy who was basically cleansed of all of the evil influences of life, what did they tell him? To fill it back up, because if you do not, what happens? How many more will they come back in with?
7, I think.
7 more. So the thing is that they're not just going to stop Cheryl with one more attack. 7 meant complete. They're going to annihilate you with numbers. Now they're going to come back and attack you even more. So if you're ever wondering why you're being attacked so many times, because again, you didn't fill it back up. So here what we've got is these strongholds that are coming in. They're coming in, and all of a sudden now they're going to branch out. These are strongholds. We have to tear down these strongholds. We have to understand what these things mean and what these things and how these things are happening. 30 is this. 30 represents the Great Commission. 30 represents go teach. Go teach. Not only teach, but do something else. What else did they have to do? They had to baptize them. Think about it. He says, go teach and what? Baptize. The thing is that what we're looking at is in baptism, and Axton and I talked about this thing. It's called mikvah. Mikvah has the reference to the flood. Mikvah is a ceremonial washing, a ceremonial purification. When I say ceremonial, what does that indicate? It's just a symbol. It's just a thing you're doing. Going to church on Sundays is just a ceremony. Getting married is called a marriage ceremony. A funeral is called a funeral ceremony. I've heard people say, I don't really care about a funeral because I'm not going to be there. It's just a ceremony. A lot of people say, hey, I don't really care about the marriage ceremony. I'm not even going to be there. So mikvah is a ceremonial washing. When Axton and whoever's wanting to be baptized, does getting in that water do anything at all? Besides, get you wet. Unless it means something to you. Now, if it means something to you, it means everything to you. Because what a mikvah represents in the big picture is, take an example of the flood. The world had to be destroyed to be remade. Mikvah represents symbolically that you are destroying that old world and your new world is being made. So when we talk about 30 degrees and mikvah, there are three words that are used to describe the process of the subject of salvation. And it is called his death, burial, and resurrection. Death is basically the mikvah. And what it represents is the death. The burial actually, it's not correct. So, three stages: death, burial, and resurrection. The resurrection becomes the tower. When we